Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tech Tuesday, or at least this recording of Tech Tuesday on Thursday. My name is Tom Levine, and I'm Cornerstone's technical specialist and commission specialist here. Today, we are covering the benefits of the Microsoft Office suite and everything that it entails. And the goal of this is kind of give you a brief walkthrough of what's available with Office right now. It is 2022, and the Office programs, as always, are not stopping changing. There are a lot of different options for you to buy from and a lot of other things that you might not know about Office, so we're hoping to cover some of those today. We're also going through some of the lesser known or lesser used functions of Office. This would be OneNote, PowerPoint, and Publisher. Nothing too complex, just kind of showing you overall how they can be used and why you might actually want to use them. Also, OneNote is just a kind of a notebook. PowerPoint is kind of what I'm using right now for this presentation. So we're going to go through a little bit of that by using this PowerPoint as an example. And finally, we're also doing Publisher. Publisher is really used for distributing pamphlets, leaflets, or any sort of marketing material that you would physically hand out to people. It's very useful overall, but without further ado, let's get started on some announcements. First, normally we'd say there's housekeeping. If you had any questions, put it in the box there on your viewer. But since this is a recording, I will say that if you have any questions, please send me an email or give me a call. My phone number is up there on the screen along with my email address. That'd be tlevine@crnstone.com. And my phone number is 513-487-5390, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Additionally, you might be interested in earning some cash. If you are one of our Cornerstone brokers, you should sign up for our Cornerstone cash incentive program. You can earn more when you sell for all group and individual new business between January 1st of 2022 and December 31st of 2022. You'll earn prizes that'll bring you closer to your $7,000 cash prize. And you can find out more about that online at our website, www.crnstone.com/cash-incentive-program/. Additionally, you might be interested in our Autopilot program. Autopilot is our agency services program, and there's a lot to learn about that. I'd recommend reaching out to your contact here to find out more about it, but you can also read about it on our website at www.crnstone.com/what-we-offer/agency services program. It's up there on your screen right now. So before we get into the kind of secret aspects of Office, or the aspects of Office people don't really normally get into, I just want to mention real quick that you might want to take a look at what version of Office you're using. There are a lot of different versions that have been released throughout the year and actually throughout several years, and a lot of them are still working out there. They might have lost Microsoft support, but you might have an older version of the Office suite installed on your computer working just fine. If you are unsure if it's an older version or not, there's not really much of a way to tell either. If you're launching Office 365, you probably have just a button. It's like orange. You click on that and it'll say, oh, you're launching Office. And then it'll give you a whole host of other programs that you have access to. But you could also just be using a web version of Microsoft Office. You could be using just an individual program from the Microsoft Office suite. They do sell Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and Excel all as standalone products as well. And you can't really know which version you're using just by clicking on the Excel icon or the Word icon on your desktop. It's difficult to know which version you're using, so my recommendation is actually to open up your PC Start menu and just search Office. If multiple programs pop up, you're likely using the full Office suite. If not, you're just likely using one individual program. People also use this term, Microsoft Office, interchangeably sometimes. They can mean Google Sheets, Google Docs, Google Slides, all of which are free web-based programs offered by Google Drive. So if you're a Google user, you might be using those instead. They are not the same. It's not paid software. So just wanted to nip that in the bud right out of the gate. My main point, though, is that there are a lot of different ways for you to use and experience Office, and each different option kind of comes with a different suite of programs, a different suite of things that might be useful to you. So it's important to keep in mind that if you're looking on your computer and you think you have Office and you don't see one of the programs I'm talking about, or you see more programs than the ones I'm talking about, you might be using a different suite. So um, one other thing to mention as well, if you're using Microsoft's free access to basic online Office, or if you are interested in that, they do offer it now. Like I mentioned before, Google Drive has their own version of Excel, of Word, and of PowerPoint called Word, Docs, Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Slides, respectively. And in response to that competition, Microsoft actually had to give people some sort of online free access to their Office suite of programs. So if you are interested in using these, but you're not really interested in buying a full Office suite, it's an option for personal use. The reason I say for personal use is because you have to have a Microsoft account to use it. So you have to sign in and get it. You can sign up for it at www.office.com. But also, because this version of Office is not, in my opinion, meeting the standards of HIPAA. When you actually buy Office from Microsoft, it enters you into a business agreement with them, which is part of what HIPAA requires for using software like this to enter personal health information. As long as you're not using the free version to mess around with people's, PHI, then you should be fine, but it's not always the best. In addition to that, this sort of free version of Office, you can save documents on it. It might kind of try to push you into buying OneDrive, but you can save documents, but you're using it through a web browser. You're not using it from a downloaded application. So because you're actually using this on the web, unless you're using a secure portal or you're using a VPN, what you're typing in can easily be monitored. And Microsoft will actually monitor what you're typing, what you're doing, and if they find any part of what you're doing useful, they might sell that information. So in my opinion, it's a really great tool for a student. It's a really great tool for people who don't really need to use much of Excel, like charting and whatnot. If you're just trying to edit a basic document, it's a good option. But if not, I'd give this one a pass and just use a Google Sheet. So that brings me to different plans and pricing for Office. Microsoft Office actually has three main offered types of Office. This is where you might have heard of Microsoft 365 as well. Now on screen, I have Office Home and Business 2021. It's a desktop version of Office apps and licensed for commercial use at $250. Now, that high price point might scare you off of it, but there are actually reasons you might want to do it versus 365 apps for business or 365 business standard. That's just personally what I think, to each their own. What you get with that Home and Office Business 2021 are desktop versions of Office apps. Specifically, you would get desktop versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote. And you would own the software. You'd be able to install it on your system, and you'd be able to use it right out of the gate. It is yours, so you don't have to keep paying Microsoft any money to continue to use those programs, unlike with these other options. And with that one-time purchase, I think it's a much more secure way of doing things. But that's my personal opinion. One thing that isn't shown on screen, however, is there is an equivalent you can get from Microsoft 365. And the difference between 365 and just Office, Home, and Business is that 365 is Microsoft's subscription-based software. As you can see, each of these price points for the other 365 options at $825 and $1250 per month are subscriptions. They are annual subscriptions and they automatically renew. But because they're subscriptions, you will pay every single year for your Office suite. I think it's a little ridiculous to have to pay year after year after year for apps like this, but there are some benefits that come with it. The first thing I'm going to do is talk about the lowest tier 365 option for business. That is Office Home and Business 2021, aka Office 365 Home and Business. The 2021 option, that's $250, is shown on screen, but they have their equivalent for 365 called Office Business Basic. It is $5 a month instead of the $825 or $1250, and basically what that means is it would take 4 years of this subscription service for you to pay that $250 that you would for just buying Home and Business 2021 straight. Business Basic also has all of the apps mentioned above, but they're exclusive to the web versions that I was talking about before. It does give you access to all of the same programs that I just mentioned, except it also includes Outlook as a web version. The problem is, because everything is a web version, you're susceptible to the exact same things I mentioned before with the free stuff. It's just that you're under that business partnership agreement. And because you're under the business partnership agreement, then you're allowed to use it for PHI. You just have to make sure that you're storing it in a way that is compliant with HIPAA. In addition, you want to make sure you're using a VPN if you're using these services as well, because the program you're using is actually web-based. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. In addition, the exclusive web versions mean that because you're not using, your personal computer to bring up these programs, and you're operating in a browser, then it'll try to make you save to OneDrive. We're going to talk about OneDrive a little bit more in detail in a minute, but basically it's Microsoft's cloud storage system. And while it can be HIPAA compatible, you do have to do a few things to make it work. It's kind of nice because if you're saving all this data on OneDrive, you're not clogging up your computer with all of the files. The problem with that also becomes, though, you don't have full control over what's happening to those files. They could be stored on a server somewhere with Microsoft, and they could just choose to transfer that data whenever they want. So it doesn't give you as much control as you normally would. And that's actually the version that I'd recommend, that $5 a month option, if you operate entirely off of a tablet. And the reason I would recommend it for tablet users versus full computer users or laptop users is because it doesn't use as much processing power. Because you're operating through a web browser, Microsoft servers are doing all the heavy lifting to run the program. And a lot of small tablet-like devices, they work for the Office suite, but as computing power is advanced, you really need something a little more substantial than a tablet to run this stuff. So it can be useful. It has its pros and cons. I'd personally recommend using a different option unless you're just using a tablet. The next tier up is that Office 365 apps. Now, on this screen, it does have a few more check marks next to the 365 apps for business option, but those options are really just kind of optional. The main difference between the Office Home and Business 2021 that you would just purchase and the Microsoft 365 apps for business is that, well, you do get all of the downloadable full access programs that you would in Home Business 2021. You also get access to web versions of Office, mobile version of Office apps, and you also get access to that OneDrive, which you actually don't get access to through Home and Business 2021. The main reason I think that could be useful is for cloud storage, and that means you can access your documents from any device. The thing is, you can do this on your own as well, and I mean, it is still extra money a month that you're paying. So that, to me, is kind of a choice. Do you want to pay the extra money, enter into a subscription, make sure your apps are all updated constantly all the time, you're using the latest versions of these programs, or would you rather just go with something that works for you and just pay a one-time fee? It's really completely up to you, and there are different use cases that might make one program better than the other. It's really all about personal choice. One other thing that it has is access to Publisher and Microsoft Access, as well as Outlook as a desktop version. Because of the $8.25 a user a month price point, it would take 2 years and 7 months for your subscription to equal the price of that one-time purchase for Office, Home, and Business 2021. And, personally, I think the additional programs that it has are really useful. Publisher and access. You don't have access when you buy the Office Home Business 2021, but you do get publisher. So just something to think about as well. Because the programs from 365 apps would typically be running on your computer, you do have access to the full suites. So you'd be able to do pretty much whatever you want on them. And the one real big difference, other than Microsoft Access, which is something not many people use, it's why we're not really going into depth on it, between that and the next tier up, that 365 Business Standard, is that there are no automatic updates with 365 apps for business. What I mean by that is when you buy Microsoft 365 Business Standard, pay that extra bit a month for it. What that means is Microsoft will automatically keep all of your apps updated. It will automatically install Office on your computers, and it will automatically make sure that everything is completely up to date, completely perfectly working. That just means you don't have to go out and make sure you're updating your apps. You can do that yourself from 365 Apps for Business. I don't want anyone to think that, just by getting App for Business, they're not going to be able to have access to the most up-to-date software. That's not the case at all. It's just that 365 Apps for Business, you've got to go out online and make sure you're using the current versions. And I would just make sure to do that once a year. So for the $12.50 price point, there are a few other differences as well as besides that automatic updating. First, because you're paying more, you pay the same amount as you would pay for that bottom tier, the Office Home Business 2021, in 1 year and 7 months. So in my opinion, if you're not going to use any super in-depth Microsoft services such as Teams, SharePoint, Publisher, web-based Outlook, all of that kind of stuff, I think Office Home and Business 2021, the one-time purchase, is probably the better option. But if you do use some of those services that I mentioned, you might be interested in Office 365 Business Standard. It also comes with access to Azure, which is a virtual desktop environment that Microsoft offers, as well as Teams subscription lumped in, and Microsoft Exchange. So if 365 Business Standard might actually be a good payoff for you. One last thing I'd like to mention, though, before I move on from these current plans and offerings from Microsoft, is that this 365 Business Standard, it gives you a dedicated remote cloud server as well. So instead of just using the OneDrive, which you're part of their cloud storage, they actually give you a dedicated server, which is a pretty good deal, honestly. So I think that's pretty useful. So that being said, that's all of the 2021 options alone, and I know that's a mouthful, but that might actually not be your best bet. Microsoft Office 2019 and older versions have most of the same programs that are available to you from Office 2021. And while 2021 looks a little different, might feel a little bit more slick, is more optimized to work with some larger chunks of data, my recommendation is actually Office 2019. That's what we use here at Cornerstone. It does have a few 2016 apps thrown into it that just weren't updated. 2021 has very recent versions of all of those apps, but I think it's probably your best deal. You can find Office 2019 and older from any third-party retailer, really. The pros is it gives you access to OneNote, which is not something that you have from the 2021 version. necessarily. It also has a much lower price point. If you find it online, you should be paying no more than $50 for the PC version of Office 2019 and $100 for the Mac version. So that is a much lower price point than the $250 for Office 2021. It also has better compatibility with older PCs. So if your computer's from before maybe 2020, which most people's computers are, then Office 2019 will actually probably work a little bit better with it. In addition, secondhand, you can get it for much lower price point, but you're also taking a few risks. First, you have to make sure you're buying from a reputable dealer. Now, I actually do have a link that I'm going to put in the description for this video on YouTube, but my recommendation is go to electronicfirst.com. That's www.electronicfirst.com. They have Microsoft Office 2019 right now for a steal at $50, and they include a activation code, which is the other downside about buying online secondhand. When you buy Microsoft Office, you need an activation code in order to get it to work for you. Otherwise, you'll enter a free trial version, and then you'll be cut off from using the software after 3 or 4 days. This is kind of a problem for people. So when you buy it, make sure you're buying a version of the software that includes an activation key or an activation code. Most online retailers will actually email it to you, so you'll have to put in your email address when you buy it, but it's really useful. Let's compare it this way. Let's say you're going to break it down month by month over 1 year. If you bought Microsoft Office 2021, you know, because you're buying it direct from Microsoft, that it's going to include activation keys and everything you need. But it'll be $250. That's $20.83 per month if we break it down into an annual subscription method, which is a little pricey, but it pays for itself within like 2 years, in my opinion. It's really a decent price point. That being said, for Office 2019, that's a lot lower. $50 means that it would be literally under half that price. It's $416 a month for a year. So it's actually even a better deal than doing that, than doing a full year subscription to that Microsoft Apps option. Let's just go to our previous slide. As you can see, Microsoft Apps 365 for Business is $825 a month. So if you bought Office 2019, not only would you have it for just $50 flat, you'd be saving money over a year's subscription of Office 365, which I think is a really good deal. I mean, especially compared to the risk. If you do get phished, you're out maybe $50 for an activation code too, so you'd only be paying 100 flat. It's still a pretty good deal in my opinion. And you can buy those activation keys if you do get scammed for that portion of it from Microsoft Direct. You might have to look up a call number. I actually couldn't find them right now. Microsoft is having a lot of staffing issues, and they've taken down their help desk numbers online. But if you send their help desk an email, they do typically respond within 2 to 3 days, and they'll give you an activation code pretty quick. So that being said, let's talk about the one other elephant in the room using 365, which is OneDrive. OneDrive is Microsoft Cloud Storage, and like I mentioned before, it can be useful because you can pull up your documents on pretty much any device that has a web version or an accessible, desktop version or app version of the Office suite, which is really useful. You can access it from pretty much wherever you are. It's sort of Microsoft servers, so you don't have to actually set up anything on your computer to store it. And the files can really be anything that you store there. It's also getting, basically free storage space. Well, not free. You are paying for it as part of 365, but it's useful. It gives you a little bit of extra space, extra wiggle room. That because you're not storing things on your computer, it's not slowing your computer down. So it can be nice. The downsides, however, are that you don't own the server itself, which means you don't fully control what happens to the data you put on there. It also is a Microsoft server. Microsoft has access to any data that you choose to store on OneDrive, and they will sell that data to third-party, people. Jeff and I talked about it last year too on our, VPN video that, companies really do sell this information. It happens. And any document you're storing on their servers, they can do whatever they want with pretty much. It's part of the user agreement when you opt in. So it's important to understand that whatever you're storing there, Microsoft also has access to. Now, I will say PHI is excluded from this automatically. If you are doing work on the 365 platform, or saving things on OneDrive, you're automatically opted into a business association agreement with Microsoft. You can find this agreement online. I'm going to actually have that in the description as well. But essentially what it does is it basically takes care of all the necessary legal hurdles for OneDrive to be HIPAA compliant automatically, except for a few things. You are still responsible for making sure that the way you're using OneDrive is HIPAA compliant. And what that means is you have to enable two-step verification for login, if applicable. You must disable permanent deletion of your data from all users beside admins from the cloud storage. And you might also want to make sure it's set up in a saved configuration so that you have not only one drive that you're saving things to, but also a backup drive enabled as part of your OneDrive. So that might take a little bit more setup than you're used to. You also need to conduct risk assessments for third-party app integration and regularly remove devices for employees that no longer require access to that Dropbox or that OneDrive. Dropbox is another service, but it's basically the same thing, just offered by someone else. So just things to be aware of. So before we go any further into our question section and review, I would actually like to talk a little bit about some of the lesser used programs in the Office suite. And we're actually mainly going to talk about PowerPoint, as mentioned before, along with Publisher and OneNote. PowerPoint is a really useful tool, and I use it to sort of summarize data. I also use it just sort of to launch intros to these presentations. And we use it here at Cornerstone just to introduce a basic set of slides and basic information that we use to start our presentations. As you can see, we can make some pretty professional looking slides using just PowerPoint and some saved files, as well as some video editing software or image editing software as well. In order to use this, you actually only need access to a few tabs to get basic use out of PowerPoint. The first is the Home menu or Home tab, and I think this is pretty much all a very, very basic user needs to know. If you're just trying to make a few slides, display some basic sales information, then this is all you really need to use. In order to add a new slide, you would click on the New Slide button here, and it automatically inserts a new slide after the slide you have selected. So if I were to click on slide 4, which I have listed right over here, and then I were to hit new slide, then I'd make a new slide there. In order to remove a slide, I just go over to the slide deck, right-click it, and hit delete slide. The other thing you might notice about this view that I have in PowerPoint is when you open up your base PowerPoint document, you don't see this notes section right here. I actually adjust this up, but it's kind of hidden. And what I did just now is hide it actually. In order to get that to pop up for your presentations, you just go to the very bottom section here. And if you hover over it just right, you'll get that little double arrow icon on your mouse. If you click and drag up, then you can get a little bit more space here. You just double click and you can add notes for those slides. Right in here, you just hit enter, Control Z, you type just like you normally would. And so I'm actually going to add a note. And as you can see, you can add notes pretty easily to different slides. What that does in your slide view, and as you can see, I have a few other notes. And I'm just going to go ahead and start up my presentation and make it so you can see my slide deck. I'll do that by going to slideshow from beginning. I'm going to go to display settings, swap presenter and viewer slide. And as you can see, this is my view of this slideshow. I have the basic slide here. I have all of the notes that I entered before I started this presentation on the right-hand side, and I have a view of what slide's coming up next. I can also hit the button Show Taskbar to show the actual taskbar of my Windows desktop as well. If I click it again, it goes away. I can go to Display Settings and swap Presenter View and Slideshow View to swap it back and just switch what screen is displaying this information. If you're using one screen to present your slideshow, however, you will not have access to those notes. We are fortunate enough to have two at our desktops here at Cornerstone, and I'd really recommend if you don't have a second monitor to give it a try. It's very useful. In order to end the slideshow, I'm just going to swap it back and hit End Slideshow to show you, but that's how you exit a slideshow. In addition to adding new slides, however, and I'm going to click on that new slide we added originally to show you, you can also change those slides' layouts. If I click on Layout, I have a few different options that are just naturally as a part of this home screen. I can give it a comparison view, which has this sort of text box layout. I just click on a text box once on the main slide, and I can title it. And I also have subtitles, Section 1 and Section 2. And then I can make bulleted points of information. And I'm just typing bullet and hitting enter there. If you want to turn those off, those are all available from the paragraph option right here in the Home tab. Just click the drop down and now my bullets go away. And I click it again and now I have bullets. If you're not happy with the shape of those bullets, you can click on the drop down that is a part of this little icon here, and you can actually change the bullet option. So hollow. And now I have hollow points. I can also change them to squares, four-leaf clovers, and you can actually, if you're a more advanced user, change these as well. You can literally add little arrows to them. You can insert different icons. It's really fully customizable, which I think is really nice. You could also get access to numbered lists, control your indentation, kind of like using Microsoft Word, all from this paragraph option. If you're familiar with using Word, you can change fonts in exactly the same way, and along with font sizes. Highlight things exactly the same way as well. And you can change text color also the same way. So those are kinds of the basics. You can also insert images to your slides by right-clicking and going to Picture. And if you have a picture in your clipboard from a copy, you can do it that way. Or what I prefer to do is go to the Insert tab. After you have a slide you want to insert a picture to selected, and then go to Pictures. It'll bring you up a little Windows Explorer menu, and I'm going to go to my desktop presentation and use this same Cornerstone image that I've set as my desktop. Now that I have it here, I can move it around. It automatically put it in the text box that I last had created, but I'm going to show you how to add those again in a second. What I do normally to add a background to my slides, I insert an image, I get it as large as I want. Then if I right-click on the image, I can actually rearrange them. So I'm going to hit Send to Back, and that puts the image behind all of my, things I put on the slide. And that's actually how I prefer to set a background. You can manually set a background for a slide as well. That is also an option. You would do that by going into your slide designs, just right-clicking on it, Format Background, and then you can hit Picture or Texture Fill and change the picture for the background to something on file by finding it here. And now that I've set that as my background, I'm going to delete the image that I added, and that automatically inserted my text box 2 option back again, and now I have this picture set as my actual background for my slide. In addition, you can insert text boxes from the Insert tab as well if you want to add some additional text boxes in. I'm going to add one right here and say this is my new text box. In addition to that, if you go into the design tab, that would be the last thing you can do. This is really just useful if you're not quite happy with the overall design of your slides. As you can see, our slides have changed on this presentation now to all kind of match the slide design that I've just been clicking on. And each of these is completely customizable as well and free to use. So don't worry about having to pay any licensing fees if you're going to use this for an actual presentation. But that kind of finishes off our overview of PowerPoint. Let's get into Publisher. And Publisher is something they actually stopped kind of featuring as a main function of Office, but I think it's pretty useful. The way I pull it up on my desktop is just by hitting the Home button and then typing in Publisher. I'm going to hit Open now to open up the program. The reason I find Publisher useful is even though everything that you could do in Publisher you can also do in Word, I think it's a lot better for making distributables. These would be things like brochures, modern outlines for books. You can even do resumes on this as well that look a lot better than if you're just a kind of basic user of this Office software and don't really know in depth what you're doing in Word. Publisher is a great option for you. What I do is I go to built-in, and then it actually gives you a selection here. You can choose different email menus even, invitations. You can import Word documents into Publisher for some easier edits. You can also make label prints through Publisher, as well as drafting resumes, like I said. But I really like it for brochures because brochures are really difficult to get set up in Word if you're not a super user at Word, and I think this just is kind of great. You don't have to worry about actually paying for access to any of these. Once again, Microsoft distributes these as automatically installed kind of base brochure layouts, but they are fully customizable as well. For this section, I'm going to use Bounce because the orange kind of matches Cornerstone's marketing a little bit. So I'm going to just select Bounce, and then I'm going to hit Create. And what that does is it creates this really nice page layout for me. I can see the front of the brochure, the middle of the brochure, and the back of the brochure. And then I can even see the So the next thing we're going to launch into is Microsoft Publisher. And Publisher is actually extremely useful for making distributables. I think it's a lot easier to do that than in Word. And what I mean by that is actually that it's much easier to make things like brochures, flyers, and a bunch of other things in Publisher, in my opinion, than it is to do it in Word. It can be a little bit tricky to do. You can just open up a blank publication this way and design it however you wish. Or what I prefer to do actually is bring up a new window of Publisher. Once you just go to New, go to Built-in. You do this when you automatically open Publisher as well. And then I like to just click on Brochures, but you're not limited to that in Publisher. It also gives you the ability to do your resume, to make programs for different things that you're doing, like music is what is on the logo there. If you're trying to design a brochure for a concert, it also has menu options for restaurants. But like I said, I really like using it for folding things like brochures or paper folding projects. You can actually use Publisher to make lines on your paper if you want to learn an origami design. So I think that's pretty neat too. Anyway, I'm going to Built-in, and then I'm going to Brochures. We're going to use the Bounce brochure today because I think it's kind of similar to the Cornerstone logos. But you can choose any of those, that you'd like for free. These are all free built into the program, so you can use these as starting points to sort of design and incorporate your own project pretty easy. You just click into a box that's already created, and you just type in, your business name, Cornerstone, hit enter, and it actually does not take that. It can be a little bit tricky sometimes, so I'm just going to retype it. Can edit my business tagline as well, pretty easy right here on the brochure. And this is all just part of what was natively part of the outline. in the business of doing benefits. The one thing I would mention too is that if you drag pictures around, it actually kind of picks that up most of the time. If you just drag a picture now, as you can see, that text just sort of adapted to it. It kind of moved around the picture. And that's pretty much how things work by default in Publisher. It can be a little bit glitchy sometimes. It won't always pick that up, but I think it does a pretty good job. If you're trying to change this picture out, like let's say it's just kind of the default one that was here in the brochure, you want to substitute your company logo or some other picture. There are a few different ways to do it. The way I like to do it is just by deleting the picture and then inserting it, which we'll show next. But the other option is to go to change picture. Then you can just hit change picture again and browse from file. We're going to insert that same Cornerstone building picture that I like to use. So we're going to go to desktop, presentation, and then click on the image and hit insert. And now, as you can see, the image is here. However, the image is actually grouped. What that means is it's grouped to the previous image that was listed there. There are a few ways to undo this, but it's a little more advanced. My best recommendation is just leave it as it is. When you go to print this, it won't pick up on this image because it's outside of this print area, and it's just a good placeholder for these layouts. I wouldn't worry about it. If you do really want to get rid of that, though, and it's bugging you, you can click it and hit delete object, right? No. What that image actually is sort of a placeholder. I would recommend just leaving it, like I said, but what that means is it actually holds the spot of that image section as part of this brochure. So I would just not mess with it. You can move it anywhere within that page and be fine. Alternatively, as you can see, because they're grouped, you just have to kind of move the pictures together. That's the one downside to these kinds of layouts, and that's why some people like to start from scratch. But it kind of lays out everything you already need, so I find it extremely useful. It's just very low effort way to make distributables. You can also insert your own text boxes and pictures as well automatically. Just go to Pictures, select one, hit Insert, and it throws the picture in. You can resize it from within the app. You can right-click and trim it as well. What I did there was I just right-clicked. I'm going to click off of this to save the little trim that I did. But all I did was I right-clicked on it and hit this little crop option. You can also fit the whole image, even after you've cropped it, into the size that you resize after a cropping, which I think is pretty useful. And as you can see, if I drag this image around, the text has just sort of adapted to it. If I then delete this image, delete the old one there, and drag our new image over, wow, I have that there without having that placeholder image. So I think that's pretty useful, and that's how I tend to replace the images in my sections. The reason I also prefer to use this for making brochures is it, other than providing all of these text boxes for me, also provides sort of a second page view, and now I can see the inside and outside of my brochure. Just make sure that when you go to print it, you select that you are printing double-sided. Instead of one page per sheet, you're going to want to make sure that it is a folded view, or just here's the option, print on both sides. So that way when it prints out on both sides of the image. The other thing is that I think is much easier to do in Publisher is you can highlight text like I'm doing right now. Doesn't like to do that for text on multiple sides. This is clearly not the easiest way to select text, but once you have it selected, you can go to text box format, columns, and turn the entire text thing into a 2-column format. This little link here is a spill link showing that it's spilled onto the next page. And I'm just going to make sure that the next page is 2 columns as well. That spill makes it a little bit harder to select certain text, but it's just something I'd recommend, looking into a little bit more if you're interested in using Publisher versus Word. But that's just some of the basic tools that I find useful about it. Last but not least, we're going to get into OneNote. And OneNote is probably the least utilized but best feature of the Microsoft Office suite, in my opinion. I use it all the time for making notes, and it's really wonderful. If you have Office 365, it's also really useful because you can pull this up from any of your devices, and it's just a mobile notebook. That is completely digital. And what I mean by that, and you'll see when I pull up OneNote, is that it literally is a notebook. You have different tabs up here for different sections or different headings. I have a sample section selected now, but when you first open it, you'll have my notebook, some quick notes on how to get started using OneNote, 2 separate pages here, and it just sort of tells you how to use it. You can watch a 2-minute video to sort of do an intro, which I think is pretty handy. But you can take notes anywhere on the page. You can categorize it completely through different tabs and different pages. And you can even check out other tips and tricks from this quick notes page. But we're just going to go through this sample selection to give you a brief walkthrough. First off, to create a new tab, you hit the plus. That's how I created this sample section. And when you do that, it'll just say new section 1. If I click off of it, then it's there labeled. But if I want to rename it later, I just double click on the tab and I can hit another new tab. And that's how you make new tabs in a notebook. You can go to sample section now to sort of get a walkthrough of this, but you just name the page up here in the heading. I said this is page 1. I also insert a new page by just hitting the plus, and I get another new page. It starts as untitled. If I keep adding them, it'll just keep adding untitled pages. And I can just right click and hit delete to get rid of pages as well. If I want to title this page, I'm just going to do it by clicking on the heading and typing page 3. And now that updated the title over here as well. I can click these pages to jump through them pretty easy. And as you can see, I have some sample text already on this page. We'll come back to this in a minute. But you can click literally anywhere and just start typing. As you can see, I put a type there. More typing down here. And another one here. The reason I wanted to show you that is because each one of these has their own text boxes now, and I can actually just sort of move them around the page however I want. That's also useful for images. If I went to insert, I can insert Excel spreadsheets directly from here. I can insert tables, I can attach files, I can do anything I'd want to do with a digital notebook. And that makes it way more useful than just paper and pens, in my opinion. You can also, from the Home tab, access your paste bar, your taskbar, and I can paste in pictures. It actually pasted the last link I copied there because that's what I had in my toolbar. But if I wanted to, I could just go to Insert, File Attachment, and I can attach literally any file I want. If I go to the desktop, here we are, and then I go to my presentation folder, I can even attach in the file of the PowerPoint. And I have it right here. If I hold Control and double click, it'll give me a little notice that I'm opening an attachment. And if I hit OK, it opens PowerPoint. And it will actually open that PowerPoint that I had. This is the one that I actually showed you earlier, which I think is pretty useful. To remove it, you just right click and hit Cut, or you select it once and hit Delete, and it'll go away. Easy as that. You can also use that to insert images. Just go to Pictures, and you'll be able to browse your drive for any pictures you have, and it'll insert it right here as its own object. As you can see, the lines aren't going around each other. So the thing I like to do when I'm making notes is I like to have them all in one box. What I'm doing there is I'm just copying it, deleting the box, and consolidating all of my text. Just something to look out for while you're using it. Then I have my image right here. And one other thing I find useful, I'm going to go to Cornerstone's website to kind of show this off, but I'm going to go to www.cornerstone.com or CRNstone. And I'm just going to find some text that I want to copy. Let's say I want to copy this right here, this little section of this page. I copy it, then I start a new box and hit paste. It actually includes this little hyperlink here, this from www.crnstone.com. And what that does is, if I click on it now, I'm going to, just for you, show you that I'm exiting out of my window of Firefox. If I click on that link, it'll open up in my default browser, that website. So that's a really easy way to know where you got information as well, and I think it's extremely useful. You can also draw all over these notebooks if you're just a writer or if you're using it on a tablet and you just want to handwrite notes, you can. You can go into your history and view different edits if you're working in a notebook with other people. And you can even view different revisions and delete all versions. I'm not going to because I like this, but you can very easily clear out your notebook if you need. And the last thing I note about OneNote that's really useful is if you click My Notebook and hit Add Notebook, you can literally make an entirely new notebook. I'm going to save it on this PC, and I'm going to say another sample book. And then I'm going to create it. And now I have another blank notebook. If I want to switch back, I just click on the drop down there and go to My Notebook. And now I'm back to the sample notebook I had. So it's just a really easy digital notebook. And I think that's extremely useful if you're trying to keep track of, different webinar updates or take webinar notes. This is what I use, and it's extremely useful. So that kind of covers the general idea of different Office suite of products that you can access and the different uses that they go through, as well as some of the different options you can use right now. I'm going to go ahead and start this slide from my current slide and just put my contact information up on the screen. You can reach out to me at 513-487-5390 or just send me an email at tlevine@crnstone.com. If you do, make sure to include Tech Tuesday in your subject line and I'll hopefully respond to you pretty quick. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email me, and I hope you had a wonderful day and learned a little bit more about the Office suite of products. Thank you.